I want to speak to you today with a sense of urgency, with a deep burden in my heart. There is something in my spirit that I can no longer hold back. I believe that God is calling you to a higher purpose, to something that requires every ounce of your strength, every moment of your life, and every pistol of his life. It's time to move. It's time to get out of the places that have held you back, the places where comfort, complacency, and apathy have kept you shackled. It's time to get up, time to break the chains that have kept you from running the race with endurance. Time to step into the life that God has ordained for you, a life filled with purpose, with power, with mission. You see, the problem with so many of us today is that we are living a life that is far beneath what God has called us to. We have settled for comfort, we have settled for mediocrity, and we have settled for a life of ease, thinking that we are doing just fine, thinking that this is all there is. But let me tell you something, this is not all there is. God has something far greater, far more glorious, and far more demanding waiting for you. But it will not be handed to you on a silver platter. It will not come without cost. It will not come without sacrifice. You see, we have become so accustomed to our own comfort that we no longer understand the urgency of the gospel. We live in a world that is falling apart, a world that is in desperate need of the light of the gospel, and we sit idly by. We complain, we make excuses, we wait for something to happen, but the truth is nothing will happen until you move. I'm here to tell you today that it's time to rise up and walk. It's time to get out of your self-imposed prison of comfort and laziness. It's time to move. But I need you to understand something before we go any further. Moving is not just about physically going from one place to another. It's not just about running to the next thing, jumping from one opportunity to the next. It's not about doing more stuff. It's about a change of direction, a change of purpose, a change of heart. And that change begins in your mind and in your spirit. You've been sitting on the sidelines long enough. You've been playing it safe, trying to protect yourself from failure, trying to shield yourself from the pain that might come from stepping out in faith. But the truth is, the moment you step out in faith, the moment you move forward with the call of God on your life, you will encounter pain. You will encounter hardship. You will encounter opposition. But let me tell you this, that is when you will encounter the power of God in ways that you have never known. That is when the Spirit of God will come upon you in strength, in courage, and in grace to do things that you could never do on your own. But it starts with moving. It starts with getting up and leaving the place of comfort. You see, too many of us want to stay in the safety of the familiar. We want to stay in the comfort of what we know. We want to stay in the easy places, the places where there is no risk, the places where there is no threat, the places where everything is predictable. But God never called you to live in predictability. He never called you to live in comfort. He never called you to live in the safety of what you can control. He called you to live by faith. And faith is not about playing it safe. Faith is about stepping into the unknown, trusting that the one who called you will lead you and sustain you. Let me tell you something, dear friend. The moment you take a step of faith, the moment you move, you will begin to see God work in ways that will blow your mind. You will begin to see God open doors that no man can shut. You will begin to see God do miracles that you thought were impossible. You will begin to see your own life transformed in ways that you never thought possible, but you will never see that unless you move. Now, I know that some of you are scared. I know that some of you are afraid. You're afraid of what might happen if you take that step. You're afraid of failure. You're afraid of rejection. You're afraid of what others might think of you. But let me remind you of something. You are not living this life for the approval of man. You are not living this life for the comfort of your own desires. You are living this life for the glory of God. And if you move in obedience to Him, if you move in faith, He will be glorified. And He will do what He promised to do in and through your life. But you must move. You must move when everything in you wants to stay. You must move when the voices of doubt and fear scream at you to stay where you are. You must move when the temptation to retreat, to play it safe, to stay in your comfort zone is at its strongest. That is the moment when God is calling you to step out in faith, to trust Him, and to move forward with all that you have. This is not just about you. It's not just about your comfort. It's not just about your desires. It's about the kingdom of God, and it's about the lives of those who are still lost in darkness. You are part of something far greater than yourself. You are part of a plan that was set in motion before the foundations of the earth. God has called you to be a part of His redemptive work in this world, but you will never be a part of that work unless you are willing to move. This is a moment of decision. This is a moment when you must choose whether you are going to sit on the sidelines and watch as the world crumbles, or whether you are going to step into the battle. This is a moment when you must choose whether you are going to live for yourself or whether you are going to live for the purposes of God. And let me tell you, living for the purposes of God is not easy. It will cost you everything. It will cost you your comfort. It will cost you your plans. It will cost you your life. But in the end, it will be worth it. Because when you stand before Him, you will hear those words, "Well done, good and faithful servant." But that will only happen if you move. It will only happen if you take that first step of faith. It will only happen if you get up, leave the place of comfort, and walk in obedience to what God has called you to do. You were not made to sit idle. You were not made to live a life of ease. You were made to run the race with endurance. You were made to move forward, to press on, to press through the obstacles, to press through the pain, and to fulfill the purpose that God has set before you. So today, right now, I am calling you to move. Don't wait for the perfect time. Don't wait for the right circumstances. Don't wait until everything lines up perfectly. If you wait for everything to be perfect, you will never move. You must move now in the face of fear, in the face of uncertainty, in the face of every obstacle that the enemy throws your way. And when you move, God will meet you there. He will strengthen you. He will empower you. He will guide you, and He will be glorified in and through your life. You were made for more. You were made for greatness. You were made to accomplish the purposes of God in this world. But you will never accomplish those purposes if you don't move. It's time to move. It's time to get up, leave the place of comfort, and step into the calling that God has placed upon your life. It's time to stop waiting. It's time to stop making excuses. It's time to move. So what are you going to do? Will you stay where you are, or will you rise up and follow the call of God on your life? The choice is yours, but I tell you this, if you move, you will see God work in ways that will blow your mind. If you move, you will see the power of God transform your life and the lives of those around you. If you move, you will be part of something that is greater than yourself, something that will last for eternity. The time is now. The moment is here. It's time to move. The speech emphasizes the need to move forward in life with bold faith, leaving behind complacency, comfort, and self-imposed limitations. It calls for a shift in mindset, urging individuals to trust in God's guidance and action, even in the face of fear, uncertainty, and potential hardships. The speech highlights that life is not about personal comfort or success, but about fulfilling God's mission. It encourages people to understand their role in God's greater plan and step into their calling, no matter the cost, knowing that God's power and purpose will be revealed when they choose to move. There is a deep need in our world today for people to understand the urgency of stepping out in faith. Far too many individuals are sitting on the sidelines of life, waiting for the perfect conditions, waiting for the right time, waiting for everything to be aligned in their favor before they take any action. But let me tell you this, there will never be a perfect time to act. The world around us is in a constant state of change, and the challenges we face today are unlike any we have ever seen. The needs are vast, the opportunities are endless, and yet so many of us are paralyzed by fear, doubt, and hesitation. The call to step out in faith is not just a suggestion, it is a command. The scriptures make it clear that faith is not passive. It is not something you can just talk about or think about. Faith requires action. It requires you to take a step forward even when you don't know exactly where that step will lead. It requires you to trust God with the unknown, to believe that He will guide you even when the path ahead seems uncertain, even when the outcome is unclear. Faith is not about waiting for everything to be perfect before moving. Faith is about moving in the direction of God's calling, even when you feel unequipped, unprepared, or unsure. The problem today is that we have become a culture of waiters, not movers. We wait for the circumstances to change. We wait for the right opportunity. We wait for the fear to subside. We wait for confirmation. But what we fail to realize is that faith does not wait. Faith moves in the face of uncertainty. It moves in the face of fear. It moves when everything around you seems to be telling you to stay put. And it moves because it is anchored in the trust that God is who He says He is and will do what He says He will do. It's time for us to stop waiting for the world to change, to stop waiting for the right moment, and to stop waiting for all the stars to align before we take that first step. The time is now. The world around us is desperate for people who will take that step of faith, people who will step out of their comfort zones and into the unknown, trusting that God will lead them. And when we do this, when we begin to move in faith, we will experience God's presence, God's power, and God's provision in ways that we could never imagine while sitting still. But here's the reality: stepping out in faith is not easy. It requires courage. It requires trust. It requires a willingness to face opposition, to endure hardship, and to persevere when the journey gets difficult. The road of faith is not a smooth path. It's not a road without obstacles. It's not a road without challenges. And it's certainly not a road without pain, but that is precisely why faith is so powerful. Because when we step out in faith, when we move forward in obedience, God shows up. He meets us in our weakness. He strengthens us when we are weary. He provides when we don't know where our next step will take us. We often talk about faith, but the reality is that many of us are not truly living out what we claim to believe. We claim that we trust God, but our actions show otherwise. We claim that we believe in His promises, but we hesitate to act on them. Faith is not simply a set of beliefs that we mentally assent to. It is a way of living. It is a way of moving forward, of trusting God with our lives, even when everything around us tells us to be cautious. We must stop treating faith like a theoretical idea and start living it out in real time. Think about the heroes of the faith throughout Scripture. Think about Abraham, who left his homeland and stepped out in faith, not knowing where he was going, but trusting that God would lead him to the place He had promised. Think about Moses, who faced the might of Pharaoh and the difficulties of leading a nation out of slavery. Think about David, who was just a young shepherd boy, but stepped out in faith to face Goliath when everyone else was too afraid to act. These men didn't wait for everything to be perfect. They didn't wait until they felt ready. They didn't wait until they had all the answers. They stepped out in faith, and because they did, God did the miraculous through their lives. Now, it's our turn. It's our turn to step out in faith, not waiting for the perfect circumstances or the ideal conditions, but trusting that God will meet us in our steps of obedience. You may be facing a situation today that seems too big, too difficult, too impossible. But let me remind you of something: God is bigger than any problem you face. His power is greater than any obstacle. His ability to provide is limitless. When you step out in faith, you are not relying on your own strength, your own wisdom, or your own ability. You are relying on the strength and the power of the one who created the universe and holds all things together. Faith is not about having all the answers. It's about trusting the one who holds the answers. It's about believing that God is faithful to His word and that He will never leave you or forsake you. When you step out in faith, you may not know what the future holds, but you can be sure that God will be with you every step of the way. His word promises that He will lead you, guide you, and provide for you as you walk in obedience to Him. The question is not whether God is faithful. He is. The question is whether you are willing to move. You see, God is calling us to be a people of action. He is calling us to stop sitting in the safety of our comfort zones and to start moving in the direction of His will. He is calling us to step out into the unknown, to take risks for the sake of His kingdom, to trust Him with the future, even when we can't see it clearly. And when we move, when we step out in faith, we will see God do things in our lives that we could never accomplish on our own. But there is one thing we must realize: stepping out in faith is not always easy. It will require sacrifice. It will require you to let go of things that you hold dear. It may require you to step away from a life that feels comfortable and familiar. It may require you to give up your plans in order to follow God's plans. But let me tell you this: whatever you give up for the sake of following God will be nothing compared to what you will gain. The reward of walking in obedience to God far outweighs any comfort, any security, or any earthly possession. The time is now. The world is waiting for people who will step out in faith, who will trust God enough to move forward, even when it's hard, even when it's risky, even when it's uncomfortable. The needs of the world are vast. The opportunities for ministry, for spreading the gospel, for making a difference are endless. But we will never be able to meet those needs if we continue to wait. We will never be able to make a lasting impact for God's kingdom if we remain stuck in the place of inaction, paralyzed by fear and uncertain about the future. I challenge you today to take that step of faith. I challenge you to stop waiting for the right time and start trusting God right now. I challenge you to step out of your comfort zone and into the life that God has called you to. It won't be easy. It won't always make sense, but it will be worth it. Because when you move in faith, you will see God work in ways you could never imagine. You will see His power at work in your life and in the lives of those around you. And you will experience a deeper intimacy with Him than you ever thought possible. This is not a call to a life of ease. This is not a call to a life of comfort. This is a call to a life of faith, a life of action, a life of obedience. And when you step out in faith, when you move in the direction of God's will, you will find that He is faithful to meet you there. You will find that He is faithful to lead you. You will find that He is faithful to provide for you. The question is, will you move? Will you take that first step, trusting that God will guide you, trusting that He will be with you every step of the way? The time to move is now. Don't wait any longer. Step out in faith and watch God do the impossible through your life. We live in a world that constantly pulls us towards selfish desires, fleeting pleasures, and pursuits that offer little more than temporary satisfaction. The world tells us to seek comfort, success, and personal happiness above all else. It encourages us to chase after things that fade away, to build lives around things that won't last. But as followers of Jesus Christ, we are called to a different purpose, a higher purpose, a purpose that transcends anything this world can offer. Living for God's greater purpose is not just an option, it is the very reason for our existence. It is the calling that gives our lives eternal significance and directs every step we take. When we talk about living for God's greater purpose, we are not merely referring to a lofty idea or a theoretical concept. We are talking about a radical shift in how we view our lives. It's not about fitting God's will into our plans. It's about aligning our entire life with His plans. It's about stepping into the life that He has designed for us, a life that is filled with meaning, significance, and eternal impact. This is a purpose that goes beyond personal gain or temporary pleasure. It is a purpose that seeks the glory of God, the expansion of His kingdom, and the good of others. The problem today, however, is that many of us are so consumed with our own plans, desires, and pursuits that we lose sight of the bigger picture. We get distracted by the noise of this world. We become so focused on our careers, our families, and our personal ambitions that we forget that we are part of something far greater than ourselves. God has called us to a purpose that extends beyond our own lives, beyond our own comfort zones, beyond our own goals and dreams. It is a purpose that requires us to die to ourselves and live for His glory. When we live for God's greater purpose, everything changes. Our relationships, our work, our daily choices, and our priorities all take on a new dimension. The Apostle Paul spoke about this when he said, "For me to live is Christ, and to die is gain." Philippians 1:21. This statement encapsulates the essence of living for God's greater purpose. For Paul, living was not about personal success or happiness, it was about Christ. His life was not his own. It belonged to the Lord, and everything he did, every action, every thought, every word was centered around glorifying Christ and advancing His kingdom. But living for God's greater purpose isn't just about a mindset, it's about action. It's about stepping out in faith and doing the work that God has called us to do. It's about being faithful in the little things and trusting that God will use us in ways that we could never imagine. It's about surrendering our own desires, our own ambitions, and our own plans in order to fulfill the calling that God has placed on our lives. We see this clearly in the life of Jesus. He lived His life with a singular focus, the will of the Father. Everything He did was in submission to the Father's will. He was willing to endure suffering, rejection, and ultimately death because He understood that the ultimate purpose of His life was to bring glory to God and to accomplish the work of salvation for humanity. Jesus didn't live for Himself, He lived for the Father's glory and for the redemption of the lost. His life was the perfect example of what it means to live for a purpose greater than ourselves. When we follow Jesus, we are called to embrace this same mindset. We are called to live with the same commitment to the Father's will. Jesus didn't just talk about doing God's will, He showed us what it looked like. He lived it out in His daily life, and as His followers, we are called to do the same. Living for God's greater purpose means being willing to put His will above our own. It means being willing to sacrifice our comfort, our core desires, and even our very lives for the sake of His kingdom. Jesus said, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me." Luke 9:23. This is not a call to a life of ease or comfort. It's a call to die to ourselves, to surrender our personal ambitions, and to live for the glory of God. The good news, however, is that when we live for God's greater purpose, we experience a fulfillment and satisfaction that nothing else in this world can provide. The world promises us fulfillment in things like wealth, success, and personal pleasure, but these things are temporary. They can never truly satisfy the deepest longings of our hearts. Only when we live for God's greater purpose do we find the peace, joy, and fulfillment that we were created for. But this doesn't mean that living for God's purpose is always easy. There will be challenges. There will be moments of doubt, struggle, and even opposition. The world will not always understand why we live the way we do. The pursuit of God's purpose often means swimming against the current of popular culture. It means going against the grain of society's values and living according to a different standard. But in the end, the satisfaction that comes from living for God's purpose far outweighs the temporary pleasures of this world. Living for God's greater purpose also means being intentional with the time, resources, and gifts that He has entrusted to us. We are not called to live passively, waiting for God to do something in our lives. We are called to actively engage in His work. We are called to use the gifts and talents He has given us to serve others, to spread the gospel, and to make disciples. Every day is an opportunity to live out God's purpose in our lives. Whether we are at work, at home, or in our communities, we are called to be ambassadors for Christ, representing Him in everything we do. This is a radical way of living. It requires us to be intentional about how we spend our time and energy. It requires us to prioritize God's will above our own comfort and convenience. But it also offers a life that is rich with meaning, a life that is truly worth living. It offers a life that is not defined by fleeting success or temporary pleasure, but by eternal significance. One of the greatest blessings of living for God's greater purpose is that it connects us to something far bigger than ourselves. We are part of a global movement, a kingdom that spans across time and space, a kingdom that will never end. Our lives are not just a random series of events. They are part of God's grand narrative, His redemptive plan for the world. And when we live for that purpose, we align ourselves with the most important work that is happening in the universe. We become co-laborers with Christ, advancing His kingdom on earth, participating in the eternal mission of bringing people into a relationship with God. But this requires us to be intentional. It requires us to be proactive in seeking God's will and discerning the role that He wants us to play in His greater purpose. It requires us to step out in faith, trusting that God will guide us and empower us to accomplish the work He has set before us. It's easy to get caught up in the distractions of this world, to focus on our own needs and desires, to live for ourselves. But when we do that, we miss out on the incredible purpose that God has for our lives. We miss out on the fulfillment that comes from living for His glory, from serving others, and from being part of His eternal plan. The truth is that when we live for God's greater purpose, we find a life that is infinitely more rewarding than anything we could achieve on our own. So I urge you today, consider the bigger picture. Don't get bogged in temporary things of this world. Don't let the distractions and desires of this life pull you away from the greater purpose that God has called you to. Live for His glory. Live for His kingdom. Live for His eternal purposes, and in doing so, you will find the life that is truly worth living, a life that is filled with meaning, significance, and eternal impact.